Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I record this on April 30th of 2025. And today they have added a new section to D&D Beyond, Access Sage Advice for the new core rules today. So if we click on the link here, we get this lovely page that has a table of contents, Sage Advice Compendium, rules, references, official rulings, ability checks, etc. Errata for all the source books, errata for adventures, errata for legacy titles. So that's very nice. And what I want to do today, I've already gone through the new errata in a previous video. I want to go through the new Sage Advice. Now, it is a long document, so I'm not going to go through it all. But I've picked out a few things that I thought were interesting to me. A lot of it is really obvious, or I would think that viewers of my channel would already know, but I will post the link to the Sage Advice in the video description. So on your own time, if you want to check it out and see if any of the questions you have been answered, by all means, just click the link in the video description. It'll take you there. But I'm going to cover a few things in this video that I personally found interesting. And we are going to start here just with the beginning of the document where it says, Official rulings. Official rulings on how to interpret rules are made here in the Sage Advice Compendium. A dungeon master adjudicates the game and determines whether to use an official ruling in play. The DM always has the final say on rules questions. The public statements of the D&D team or anyone else at Wizards of the Coast are not official rulings. They are advice. So what we have are the rules. Then we have Sage Advice, which is official answers to the rules. Then if you have any kind of public statement from anyone on the D&D team or anything like that, those are advice but not official rules. And as always, your DM decides how they're going to use the rules. So the DM can change a written rule. The DM can ignore Sage Advice if they want to. But nevertheless, when I am a DM, I like to know what the official rules are. And I will generally follow them unless there is some good reason not to. So it is good to know the difference between an official rule and advice from the D&D team. And here are the examples that I thought were interesting. If I am hidden and a creature with blind sight or true sight sees me, am I still hidden? Hiding rules, not great, as we all know. It says, no, being hidden is a game state that gives you the invisible condition. If a creature finds you, you're no longer hidden and you lose that condition, as explained in the hide action. What this doesn't answer is what it takes for a creature to find you. It kind of implies that a creature with blind sight or true sight, as long as you're in their line of sight, automatically finds you, maybe, but it's not super clear. I really wish they'd be more clear about what it means for a creature to find you. But I thought it was interesting. Here's one that I have had come up over and over again since adopting the new rules. The stun condition no longer prevents you from moving. Is that change intentional? Had so many people think that it did not allow you to move, and if there seemed to be a way that you could move with the stun condition, it must be a mistake. It says, yes, we have intentionally increased the differences between the stunned and paralyzed condition, with stunned now allowing you to move. So they're saying, yes, you can move when you're stunned. Yes, that is intentional. Does all magical darkness block dark vision? This is something that I end up in with debates with people all the time. And I've said this in videos before, that magical darkness on its own does not block dark vision. So if you have the Summon Fae spell, one of the Fae spirits, when they use their bonus action to teleport, can create an area of magical darkness. And when I'm running a game, they'll do that, and then I'll have, a creature attack through it because they have dark vision. And they say, well, they can't use dark vision to see through it because it's magical darkness, and dark vision can't see through magical darkness. Magical darkness blocks dark vision only if the rules text for a particular instance of darkness says it does. For example, the darkness spell specifies that dark vision can't see through it. That obstruction is a feature of the spell, not a feature of magical darkness in general. So yes, you can see through magical darkness with dark vision unless a feature specifically says you can't, such as the darkness spell. And this is very confusing because, they have creatures in the monster manual, including the new monster manual, that have dark vision, and then they'll have in parentheses, includes magical darkness. This replaces the whole devil's sight. Except dark vision can already see through magical darkness according to their own official rules. So, yeah, it's just confusingly written. Devil's Sight from the Warlock is also confusingly written. Nevertheless, there is no feature in Dungeons & Dragons that says magical darkness blocks dark vision. Here is the official ruling on that. Magical darkness does not block dark vision. The darkness spell does, because the spell text says it blocks dark vision. And move on. That's it. I'm not debating that further in the comments, by the way. If you have a feature like Cunning Action or Step of the Wind, can you take the dash action more than once on your turn? I bring this one up. I always thought it was obvious. However, every time that I have a video where I talk about taking the dash action more than once, I'll get at least one comment and sometimes several comments telling me that you can't take the dash action more than once on your turn because you can't double your speed more than once. But the dash action doesn't double your speed. If you can take dash action as bonus actions, nothing in the rules prevents you from taking the dash action with your regular action too. The same principle holds when you use a feature like Action Surge. You could use both of your actions to take the dash action, and each time you would move up to your speed, and your speed does not change when you take the dash action. How does readying a spell work? Do you lose your spell slot if the trigger never occurs? This also has not changed from the 2014 rules. The rules have always been that when you ready a spell, you cast the spell as part of the readied action, and then when the trigger takes place, you can use a reaction to release the spell. So it says here, when you take a ready action to ready a spell, you immediately expend any resources used to cast said spell, including any spell slot. You don't get any of these resources back if the trigger never occurs. So, I am going to cast Hold Person, and I ready the spell in case somebody comes within range that is applicable for this spell. And that never happens. Well, guess what? I lost the spell slot to cast Hold Person because I gave it up as soon as I readied that spell. How does a reach weapon work with opportunity attack? So again, there's no change from the rules here, but I think this actually answers a question that beyond this, I think. An opportunity attack is triggered when a creature you can see moves beyond your reach. If you want to make an opportunity attack with a reach weapon, such as a glaive or a halberd, you can do so when a creature leaves the reach you have with that weapon. For example, if you're wielding a halberd, a creature that is right next to you could move 5 feet away without triggering an opportunity attack. This suggests to me that you can't even make an unarmed strike against them, even though your reach with an unarmed strike is 5 feet. And this might answer some questions with monsters that have multiple attacks with different reach. When do you provoke the opportunity attack? Well, it says here, you could move 5 feet without triggering an opportunity attack. If that creature tries to move an additional 5 feet, leaving your 10-foot reach, the creature triggers an opportunity attack, and I think the way that's worded would suggest that the opportunity attack occurs before the movement is completed. So you are attacking them when they're still 10 feet away, so you can't actually attack something out of your reach with an opportunity attack, just because this affects certain things in the game, such as the Sentinel feat. All right. Can an opportunity attack be used to make a grapple or shove? This is new in the new rules. I've discovered this a long time ago, but this is a good point to share that, yes, this is official. Yes, when you make an opportunity attack, one of your options is making an unarmed strike. Though, why then would we not provoke an opportunity attack if a creature moves 5 feet away from us while holding a reach weapon? I don't know. You can still choose to use the grapple or shove options of this unarmed strike. That's the important thing. Can you grapple with an unarmed strike? Yes. Can you shove with an unarmed strike? Yes. If you use an unarmed strike to make an opportunity attack, can you still use these options? Yes. And that makes it very interesting, because if you grapple a creature that's trying to move away from you, guess what? Can't move away from you. And, just reading this again, right at this moment, I have to think this was an oversight when they answered the question, how does a reach weapon work with opportunity attack? You must still be able to make an unarmed strike against an opponent that moves more than 5 feet away from you. Maybe they meant that the opportunity attack from the Glaver halberd isn't triggered, I suppose. But they could have been more clear about that if that's the case. Can I make an attack with a light weapon, then draw a second weapon with my other hand and qualify to make the extra attack of the light property? Yes, the only requirement for the light property's extra attack is that it's made with a different light weapon. The frustrating thing about this isn't the question everybody's been asking. The question everybody's been asking is, can I make an attack with a light weapon, then draw a second weapon with the same hand and qualify to make the extra attack of the light property? And I wish that had been the question they had answered. Nevertheless, there it is. Which spell scrolls can bards understand? Spells from the bard list only, or spells from the bard list plus spells for magical secrets? A bard can use any spell scroll that has a bard spell on it. This includes any spells the bard has prepared through their magical secrets feature. However, this doesn't mean that a bard can use a spell scroll for any spell on the cleric, druid, or wizard spell lists. The other spell lists included in magical secrets. For spells exclusive to the cleric, druid, and wizard lists, a bard must have that spell prepared via magical secrets for it to count as a bard spell. So this is just a misconception I have seen. When your bard gets to level 10, they can prepare spells from the cleric, druid, and wizard spell lists, and those count as bard spells for them. That does not mean that all spells on the cleric, druid, and wizard spell lists are now bard spells for them. Only the ones they prepare are. Does the martial arts feature from turn monk weapons and unarmed strikes into finesse weapons? I brought this up in videos before, and once in a while, somebody will point out that, if I can use dexterity, then that counts the same as a finesse weapon. And I've always said, no, that's not the finesse weapon property. It says, no, the feature grants a benefit that is similar to the finesse property, but the feature doesn't confer that property. So just because you can make an attack with dexterity doesn't mean it counts as having the finesse property for qualifying for sneak attack, unless your DM says otherwise. Metamagic rules state you can't use multiple metamagic options on a single spell. Can you use one option multiple times? I thought this one was interesting because I had a conversation with a friend who asked me, they had been in a group and somebody cast Chromatic Orb, and then they used Seeking Spell on that Chromatic Orb to re-roll the attack roll. Then the Chromatic Orb bounced and it missed, and they wanted to use Seeking Spell again. And they said, Seeking Spell only says that you can't use a different metamagic on the same spell. Can you just use Seeking Spell more than once on the same spell? A sorcerer can use one metamagic option once in the casting of a spell, not the same option more than once. For example, a sorcerer can't quadruple the duration of a spell by spending 2 sorcery points on extend spell. So you can use one metamagic option on a spell. When we get to a certain level in sorcerer, we can use 2 metamagic options on the same spell, but we can't use the same metamagic option more than once. Can empowered spell affect all rays of a scorching ray or just one? Found this interesting, and I'm glad they answered it. A sorcerer's empowered spell could affect more than one ray of a scorching ray, abiding by the feature's die limit. And I should mention, what empowered spell does is it allows you to re-roll damage dice from a spell you cast up to a number of dice equal to your charisma modifier. For instance, you can create 3 rays with a spell, and you have a +3 charisma modifier. You could re-roll 1 of the damage dice for each ray, or 2 of the damage dice for 1 ray and 1 of the damage dice for another one. All right, this one is going to affect an upcoming video because I made the mistake. So I'm going to have a video released on invocations for warlocks very soon, and I cover Pact of the Blade. And in that video, I say that Pact of the Blade only works with melee weapons. It says here, if a warlock uses Pact of the Blade to bond with a magic weapon, does that magic weapon have to be a melee weapon? And can the warlock change the weapon's form? This reads, The Warlock's Pact of the Blade feature lets you create a melee weapon out of nothing. So if you're creating a weapon, it has to be a melee weapon. Whenever you do so, you determine the weapon's form, choosing from the melee weapon options in the weapons table in the player's handbook. For example, you can create a great axe, then use this feature again to create a javelin, which causes the great axe to disappear. You can also use Pact of the Blade to bond with a magic weapon, turning it into your Pact weapon. This magic weapon doesn't have to be a melee weapon, so you could use the feature on a +1 longbow, for instance. However, you can't change the form of a magic weapon using this feature. For example, if you bond with a dagger of venom, you can't transform it into a maul, it's always a dagger. The feature allows the conjuring forth of a melee weapon, yet we allow more versatility when it comes to magic weapons. We didn't want a narrow focus in this feature to make a warlock unhappy when a variety of magic weapons appear in a campaign. Does this versatility extend outside the melee theme of the feature? It sure does, but we're willing to occasionally bend a design concept if doing so is likely to increase a player's happiness. So they're saying, yes, you can bind with a ranged weapon. Yes, this was intentional, but yeah, the ranged weapon must be a magical weapon. In my video, I say it only works with melee weapons. Just be prepared. I think that'll be 2 videos from now. I'm going to have a pinned comment with this correction. All right. If you use Great Weapon Fighting with a spell like Divine Smite or Hex, do you get to reroll any 1 or 2 you roll for additional damage? So this has come up in conversations I've had with people a number of times since the new rules came out, because the wording for Great Weapon Fighting has changed, and we know that in the 2014 rules, Great Weapon Fighting only applied to the weapon's damage dice. With the new rules, did that change? Did that restriction change in any way? Well, according to this, the Great Weapon Fighting feat benefits only the damage roll of the weapon used for the attack. So that seems to answer the question pretty clearly. However, then they continue. For example, if you have this feat and make an attack roll with a greatsword, you can re-roll any 1 or 2 you roll on the weapon's 2d6. Except that's not what Great Weapon Fighting does anymore. Great Weapon Fighting allows you to treat any 1 or 2 that you roll as a 3. So, this says that it still only affects the weapon's damage dice, not additional damage dice you add. However, they used an example that no longer applies. So, I guess officially it still applies only to the weapon's damage, but maybe they made a mistake. They definitely made a mistake. Maybe it will be changed at some point. All right. This is we're going to get into the seriously confusing territory here. Which of a character's spells count as class spells? For example, if I'm playing a sorcerer, which of my character's spells are sorcerer spells? This has recently come up, even in a build I've been playing, where, I have spells through multiple classes that I have through multi-classing, and do they count as, if I want to use Agonizing Blast on a cantrip, do I have to get the cantrip through the Warlock class, or can I get it through this other class? Like if I have Sorcerer, can I cast a cantrip with Sorcerer with an 8 sorcery, but if it's also on the Warlock spell list, can I also use Agonizing Blast with it? Well, this says, a class's spell list specifies the spells that belong to the class. For example, a Sorcerer spell is a spell on the Sorcerer's spell list. And if a Sorcerer knows spells that aren't on that list, those spells aren't Sorcerer spells unless the feature says otherwise. But if the Sorcerer knows spells that are on that list, then presumably they are Sorcerer spells. Except, very next one, a Wizard multiclasses into Sorcerer with a Wild Magic Sorcery subclass. Do spells cast from their spellbook trigger Wild Magic Surge if they are on the Sorcerer spell list? Or do they have to gain them from the Sorcerer to trigger? From the multiclassing rules, each spell you prepare is associated with one of your classes. This rule means only the spells prepared as part of your Sorcerer class trigger Wild Magic Surge. So, is the spell you gain through Wizard that is also on the Sorcerer spell list considered a Sorcerer spell? According to the first one of these, yes. According to the second one of these, of course not. I don't know. Maybe they only mean things like Magic Initiate, right? That isn't associated with multiclassing. That is considered part of your spell list if it's on that class spell list. I guess. I don't know. But these seem to conflict as far as I'm concerned. Unless I'm missing something. If I'm missing something, by all means, of course, correct me in the comments. I just saw these earlier today. Can you cast a reaction spell on your turn? All right. So the old rules said if you cast a spell as a bonus action, any other spell you cast on your turn had to be a cantrip. That rule no longer exists. Now the rule says that you can't expend more than one spell slot to cast a spell on your turn. So can you cast a reaction spell on your turn? Yes, but you must abide by the rule of expending only one spell slot to cast a spell on your turn. For example, if you take a magic action to cast Fireball using a spell slot, you can't cast Counterspell on the same turn using another spell slot. What's the amount of interaction needed to use a spellcasting focus? Does it have to be included in the somatic component? So when the new rules came out, my biggest point of frustration was they did not change the rules for spellcasting focuses, which are needlessly complicated. So, what's the amount of interaction needed to use a spellcasting focus? Does it have to be included in the somatic component? Here is their answer. If a spell requires material components, the spellcaster must have a free hand to access or hold them. But it can be the same hand used to perform somatic components, if any, which sounds simple enough. This latter rule holds true for a spellcasting focus, which a spellcaster must hold unless its description says otherwise. So far, so good. For example, a cleric uses an emblem on a shield as their holy symbol. When in combat, this cleric likes to wield a mace in one hand and the emblazoned shield in the other. This cleric must have the shield in hand when casting a cleric spell that requires a material component. Great. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff. If the spell, such as Aid, also requires a somatic component, the cleric can perform the somatic component with the hand holding the shield, allowing the cleric to keep wielding the mace. However, if this same cleric were to later cast Cure Wounds, which has a somatic component but no material components, they would need to unequip their shield or mace to free a hand for the somatic components. I mean, that's the rules the way they're written, and they're just telling you, yep, this is how it's written. There's no explanation here as to why they kept it the same. I have no idea why they kept it the same. It's just makes things a pain in the neck. A lot of DMs, by the way, hand wave this. So if you are playing in a campaign or about to play in a campaign or even a one-shot, and this really complex rule is maybe going to mess up your build, talk to your DM, because a lot of them don't use this. But these are the rules. So there it is. All right. Here's one that's come up since the new rules. With the Armor of Agathys, what happens is you cast it, lasts an hour, or it maybe lasts an hour, because it gives you temporary hit points, and then whenever you take damage, the creature that attacked you takes some damage if it was a melee attack. But it just says that the spell ends early if you have no temporary hit points. So what if I get temporary hit points from another source? Does that extend the duration of my Armor of Agathys? Can you extend the duration of Armor of Agathys by gaining more temporary hit points? The spell requires you to have temporary hit points, and they don't need to be from the spell. So you can extend the duration of the damage that your Armor of Agathys causes from the spell for as long as the spell's duration of 1 hour, as long as you have temporary hit points. But they don't have to be the temporary hit points that the spell provided. And one of the combinations that's often been mentioned is if you cast Polymorph, you might have a whole ton of temporary hit points. That can keep your Armor of Agathys going for a long, long time, potentially up to the full hour, just because you have a lot of temporary hit points to burn through. And the last one I picked out, can you use Dispel Magic to dispel a magical effect like a Druid's Wild Shape? This has not changed from the previous rules, but every once in a while, I will be running a game with some new players, and somebody casts Dispel Magic on something that is not a spell. And I tell them it doesn't work. And they are kind of frustrated, and I usually let them take it back. And then I explain that Dispel Magic only works on spells. And they will inevitably point out that Dispel Magic, the very first line, says that you can target a spell or a magical effect. Now, if you keep reading the spell, it tells you that, that it dispels the spell. But they say, why would it say that you can target a magical effect if it doesn't work on magical effects? It only works on spells. Well, it says, Dispel Magic has a particular purpose to break other spells. It has no effect on a magical effect that isn't created by a spell unless the text says otherwise, though the DM can make exceptions. The DM can always make exceptions. They don't need to put that here because that's always the case. But yeah, a lot of spells have magical effects. And they actually use this example on a different Sage Advice that I didn't copy here, where if you cast Bless, you create a magical effect on 3 different characters. And if somebody casts Dispel Magic on one of those characters, it ends the magical effect on that character from that spell, but it does not end the Bless spell entirely. So the other 2 characters can still benefit from it. So that's what they mean when they say that Dispel Magic can target a magical effect. They're talking about a magical effect from a spell. And it dispels a spell, but other sources of magic doesn't do anything. Anyways, those are the ones I found interesting. But the link is in the video description. Check and see if questions you've had about the new rules are answered. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you next time.